Something I really was struck by is your interest in the very articulate, deliberate, and virtuosic dancing body that's not at all a pedestrian mover, which is a really a brilliant thing to see these exquisite dancers. And could you just say something about what your interest is in that highly trained dancing body?
First of all, about the virtuosic thing, I think is interesting because I feel like I try to use it and undercut it at the same time. So there's reasons for them to have a high leg, but it's not always a high leg because sometimes we do a low leg. So it's more about showing the choice, like we have choices, not sort of this like, well, we can do this, so we're just gonna do it. So that's sort of in my head, and also the way we perform those steps that are so-called virtuosic. Is not a performance, it's like people. So it's like regular people performing these sort of amazing, clear, clean. And the other part of your question is I've been thinking about that a lot because talking about my work and people ask me questions about ballet and Cunningham and this, and I really feel like it's really about what I decided to just forget about all those sort of, I love them, but I also have to release myself from them. And what it is I love dance, I love clean lines and the energy. And so it's really sort of a basic thing that I start from.
So yeah, because I think the thing you're saying about them being kind of ordinary people comes through in some moments of when they watch each other or when they touch each other, that those feel like sort of just like really regular kind of moments.
Right,
although
exactly.
Also sometimes very choreographed, where everybody's focus will.
Well,
will
it's all
shift
choreographed,
yeah, of course.
but it's also it's about that inner world, but also I also question the idea of performing. So like you'll see the the things happening in the wings, for example, is done on purpose. So it's not like, don't look at this, but look at this. I'm assuming that you're going to look at everything. You, especially in the second half of the evening, you really are although you're making work for a proscenium stage for the Mars part, you're really pushing it here in terms of space, but also time. So the second half starts and dancers come out, musicians haven't arrived yet, they start dancing, audience is still filtering in. It's about that expectation, again, about presentation. So you come here, the house lights, the house lights go down, the show goes up. So, but what happens if the house lights don't go down and we just start dancing? Like what, like just sort of to acknowledge, it's like that, I'll use the word, but it's sort of that fourth wall, breaking the fourth wall, but not in a way that, but in a way that works with the piece. So it's not a gimmick, it's part of the structure of the work.
Could you just say something about coming into the space and thinking about, well, although it's a theater, it's also a site that we're going to play with very specifically, because this is a different place from the Joyce, for example.
Yeah, so this work was made for the Joyce specifically, so the costumes that are red match the red curtain at the Joyce. So there's places we go. So the section where just the lights are on the feet, the curtain was covering, and we just saw the feet under the curtain. So we have to come up with my amazing lighting designer, Davison, right there.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about him in a minute.
Yeah, and amazing collaborator. So we go into each space and acknowledge the space, just the way I like to acknowledge. So like it starts with the choreography and the steps, obviously, and the composition. Then it is also, another layer is the structure of the dance. Then another layer is, where are we? I don't want to perform it like I performed it at the Joyce, because it doesn't make sense here, and you can't come here and not open that door. I mean, you just can't, so.
So you have a really unusual moment in the first piece where the musicians get up and leave, and then we really hear the silence. There's a dramatic mood shift in the lighting. We hear the silence, and then we hear a recorded score that was commissioned for this work. Could you talk about that, rather than having it be, so you didn't make a new piece. This is it is one piece that has two parts to it.
Correct. And the first part was actually made on ABT dancers that I did in a workshop 2 years ago. And but I went in there knowing that I was gonna steal it back for myself. But a lot of the steps, like when they're in the corner and they go up on releve and down, that was from point shoe. So in a certain way, like I don't know if I would have gotten to that spot if I started, I don't know. So I sort of love the process, and I love reflecting what happens in the studio into the work too. So that sort of is reflected in that piece too. So the dancer that arrives late, in like 30 minutes into the work was also a conscious. I knew I wanted to do that. I didn't like book him till later. Like I was laying in bed going, wait, I need something else, And so that's reflected in the process. And then my job, after I have this like idea, is how do I make that idea part of the piece, and how do I make it integral and not just like this extra thing,
One of the things that I think is really striking is the way you work with your collaborators to make the worlds of these works very different. So the first piece, they're kind of quirky and individual, and it's a little cooler in both like sort of temperament and personality, and heightened by the gorgeous costumes by Reed Barthelme and Harriet Young. And then working with Davison on the lighting design, they add such complementary artistic sensibilities to the work. And can you just talk about how you collaborate with them?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, dance is visual, and it took me a while to figure out as I've been making work that everything matters, So, and actually, the first thing people see is what the dancers are wearing, And costumes are a really hard thing for me, actually. But it's really it's so important because it's the skin that the dance lives in, And so it's just conversations. I'll go to Reed and Harriet with ideas. They'll come to rehearsal. They'll get ideas from what I'm saying, but they don't really listen to me.
I don't think I've ever been so grateful to the Joyce for having a red curtain, but to see those gorgeous red velvet costumes
people
here.
thought I was crazy. They were like, red velour? And like I wanted the ruching, like the curtain. So that was like a very specific idea, but Reed came up with the silhouette and all those things.
This is a great question. I'm asking about the distinction, not just about what the bodies themselves are doing, but how the bodies are interacting with the space. And she's wondering if part of your process is actually thinking about sort of the pathways through space, how the space is used, independent maybe even of what the dancers are doing to travel.
It's an amazing question because that's what I do first. I draw. In my notebook, it looks like a football diagram, and I have ideas of what kind of steps they're doing, but I draw little boxes. It's like what do they do? Like a storyboard, and I draw dots or I use coins, and I look and I place people, and that's what I do first, and then I draw lines and where they go. It doesn't always work how I don't. And so I prepare myself that way, and then when I get into the studio, different things happen. But the more prepared you are, the more freedom you can actually have when you're actually making it. But that's one of my favorite things to do.